Hi guys, and welcome to another video. Today I am going to be doing an updated version of what you need for your first horse. So I created this video 3 years ago and I just thought I'd update it because it still gets a lot of views and I still get a lot of questions on it. So today we're going to go through everything you need for your very first horse, whether you are loaning or whether you are buying a horse. If you're loaning, you'll need less items normally because the horse will come with more, but it's still the same sort of commitment. So the first thing we're going to need is somewhere to keep our horse. Now, if you're lucky like I am, you might live on a farm and you might have stables on your own land that you can keep them on. If not, you're probably going to need a livery yard. Now, there's various different types of livery. There's grass livery, there's part livery, there's full livery, there's DIY. So you need to decide what's best for you and your horse, whether you're working full time and you're going to need full livery. So basically the person in the yard looks after your horse most of the time and you can just go and see them and ride and things like that. But they take care of the horse. Whether you need part livery, so you're going to need certain days where maybe they turn out and muck out or bring in and things like that. Or maybe you're going to do DIY, which is the most common, where basically you rent a stable and you rent a paddock and you look after your horse on their land. So there's various different types and you need to weigh up the pros and cons of each and decide where you're keeping your horse. I'd recommend visiting yards, seeing what the atmosphere is like. That's a really big one because a lot of yards can be quite bitchy and not that friendly. So it's really important that you feel comfortable in your yard, especially if this is your first horse. And also price and things like that. Obviously, if you go for grass livery where you're basically just renting a field, that's going to be a lot cheaper, but may not be, the best option. And also look at the facilities that the yard has. So things like an all-weather arena, maybe an indoor arena, things like that. So once you've decided, right, this is where I'm keeping my horse, and you've signed a contract and everything, and you've got a date for when you're moving your horse and everything, we need to think about a lot of other things in preparation. So the other things that you're going to need to think about are vet and farrier and insurance. So insurance is a big one that a lot of people on my last video were asking if it was necessary. As someone who has worked alongside the veterinary industry, and I've done a lot of work experience at equine vets and normal vets because I was originally planning to be a vet myself, I would say 100% you need insurance. Now, my reasoning for this is because if you have colic, which is very common in horses, it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of pounds. And if you need colic surgery, and you don't have insurance, most vets will not operate. That's just because they know they're not going to get their money otherwise. So, number one, I would definitely recommend getting insurance. It's not that expensive. It's about £40 a month. It can be cheaper depending on the horse. It can be more depending on the horse, but it's completely worth it. Our last vet visit we had was literally a few boosters and things like that, and it came to over £300, and that's just for a regular checkup. It's a £40 call-out fee to begin with. So vet's fees are very, very expensive, and if you have a long-term condition, it will literally cost you thousands of pounds that you probably don't have sitting in the bank. So definitely get insurance. So then obviously you're going to need a vet. Now I would recommend going for your local vets, your local equine vets, because they're the ones that are nearest to you, and so they can get to you the quickest if you ever do have an emergency. But also check reviews, ask people on the yard you're moving to which vets they use, because normally if you have a call out for certain things, like inoculations or anything, if they're at similar times, then you can split the bill for the call out charge and things like that, so that can be helpful. And I would also, while you're there, ask them which farrier they use, because again, if you've got a farrier coming out, he'd sooner come out and do like half the yard or the entire yard rather than having come out to do one or two horses. So check which farrier they use, check prices and things like that. So once you've decided on your stable and everything, you're going to need some hay or haylage to feed your horse. and some shavings. So again, check with your yard. Some livery yards can be a bit funny about what suppliers you use. A lot will say there's a condition that you have to buy it from them, which will kind of normally work out more expensive and can be a little bit of a trap, so make sure that you're getting, you know, a good deal. If you can source your own, that's generally the best way, because you can sort of compete on prices and things like that. Hay, I'd recommend trying to buy in bulk if you can, because it will work out a lot cheaper. And with your shavings, you're generally going to pay a specific price. Obviously you don't have to use shavings, you can use straw. You need to check what bedding your livery yard allows, because I've been on yards before where they make you use a certain type of bedding for either because of the muck heap or for certain reasons, but a lot of livery yards can be really picky over those things. So obviously we need hay, we need bedding. So obviously it's up to you whether you feed hay or haylage. Depending on the quality of hay, haylage can be easier to feed because you're kind of guaranteed a better quality, but that depends on your source. One thing I will suggest is ask the previous owner of the horse what they're fed currently. So when you're transitioning your horse from homes and it's a very stressful time for them, you don't want to be changing their diet. You want to try and keep their diet as same as possible. This will just mean that you're less likely to get colic and other things that are going to cause a stomach upset, because obviously this is a very stressful time for your horse. So also quickly while I'm here, we're going to need some hay nets to put hay or haylage in. So this is a haylage net, they tend to be smaller holes, and then this one is a hay net. You can just pick these up at your local equestrian store, they're really not very expensive. I'd recommend getting quite a few because your horse might have several nets a day, or you might just find it easier because you can make up like 3 nets and then you've always got one spare. So I'd recommend getting a few hay nets if you can. I'd say get at least 3 to begin with, because they don't last forever, they do sometimes break. But yeah, you're going to need quite a few hay nets. Okay, so we're now in my feed room and we're going to come on to feed. So exactly the same as with your hay or haylage, I'd recommend asking the previous owner what the horse was been fed on. Not all horses need concentrated feed, it depends on your horse, how much weight they're having, etc. So I'd start by feeding them whatever the previous owner has been feeding them, and obviously you can change it in a month or so's time, and I'd recommend speaking to a dietitian about your horse's diet. So obviously you're going to want some food, you're going to need a storage bin for that food as well, but you're also going to need a bucket to feed it in. I'd recommend getting some of these like little flexi tubs or something like that. These are super easy to keep clean, and yeah, I just really like them, and you can get them in so many colours, and if you're like me, you might be going for that matchy colour scheme. So these are the sort of storage containers you can buy at your local equestrian store, and they keep your feed nice and fresh. So here we have some pony nuts. So I'd really recommend these. You should have a space in either a feed barn or a tack room or something to keep things like this. You'll also possibly want a mixer. And in terms of supplements and things like that, again, I'd ask the previous owner what they've done in terms of supplements, and you know, make a decision on whether you want to continue that or not. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is some tack. So you may have already arranged to buy the tack that the horse already has from the previous owner. If so, that's great, but make sure that you get it fitted and check that it does fit, because sometimes people can try and sell like old tack that doesn't really fit them anymore, and things like that. So I'd recommend, if you're sort of new to horses and things like that, going for a general purpose saddle, just because you might not know what discipline you're into yet. This is my dressage saddle for Chilli. It's got a dressage girth and dressage leathers and everything. So you are going to need a girth, you're going to need leathers, you're going to need stirrup irons, you're going to need numbness, and you're going to need a bridle. They're like the basics. You may need boots like brushing boots or overreach boots. Again, check what the horse is being used currently, see how they went when you tried them and whether they, you know, you think they require those boots. You don't have to go out and buy an entire tack shop straight away. Just get the basics and you can add to it as you go along. So in terms of saddle pads, you don't need an entire collection like me. Like, you don't need every colour of the rainbow. I'd recommend buying one white saddle pad and then another one just to swap them about, so you've got one that can be worn while the other one's in the wash. And literally start with 2, because this is a really expensive time, and if you go out and buy every Lumiere saddle pad you can, you're not going to have any money left. So depending on what discipline you're doing, if you know you're doing dressage, you know, buy a dressage square. If you know you're going to be jumping mostly, maybe get close contact. But I'd recommend just going with general purpose if you're using a general purpose saddle. So for example, this is my general purpose Lumiere in sorbet, and you know, they are fantastic little things, but you also don't need to buy the most expensive brand. Just because everyone else has Lumiere doesn't mean you need it, because you can find them so much cheaper in other brands. And literally have a look on eBay. I bought this one for I think about £12 off eBay, brand new. So do a bit of shopping around. So the other thing in terms of tack, you could literally go to a tack shop and just keep buying tack forever, and you might never use it all. So one thing I would recommend is getting a lunge line, just because even simple things like loading, you might need a lunge line, and instead of buying like a full cavesson or anything like that, I just get one of these. I can never remember what they're called, but they're a bit attachment for your lunge, which means all you need is a bridle and a lunge line and you can lunge your horse. Okay, so now we're moving on to the first aid kit. Now literally this entire set of lockers is my first aid kit. You do not need to go out and buy the world's largest first aid kit. So I can't remember what's in each drawer, but in here we have things like Gamgee, which I'd recommend getting, bandages and things like that. You can buy first aid kits that are already made, but you don't get a huge amount in them. So maybe get that as sort of, you know, your basics, and then buy a few things around it. So some things I'd recommend getting are some scissors, because you will need those. So this is just some dressing, that always comes in handy. I'd also get some vet wrap. Don't go mad on the lotions and potions, but I would get some cut or wound powder or gel. Okay, so in terms of your first aid kit, I'd also recommend getting some Hibby scrub, which is a antibacterial scrub. So if you have any cuts or anything like that, it comes in really handy. I'd also get a thermometer, because you need to check your horse's temperature and you need to get used to what is normal for them. I'd also get a stethoscope to take the pulse. It doesn't have to be the world's best one, just one that you can hear their heart rate on. And it's also worth it getting a few syringes, so some small ones and some big ones, especially if your horse ever sort of goes lame or anything and needs bute, because a lot of time a horse won't take bute normally and won't just eat it, and you have to syringe it, so they do come in handy. But there is literally so much you can buy for a first aid kit, so I'd recommend just getting a little kit, see what's in it, and you know, add what you think out of what I said. It's also worth getting a small first aid kit for yourself, because being around horses is very dangerous, and even just things like pitchforks and things like that, you can accidentally stab yourself. So if you've got, you know, a little bit of antibacterial wipes or something, or a plaster, they do come in handy for humans as well as horses. So with our tack, we're going to need something to clean it. So I'd recommend buying a normal tack soap and a sponge, and then having sort of like a bucket or something to keep it in. We tend to keep ours in buckets just like this one. This is just an old Polygon powder, so an old supplement bucket. You might also want some leather oil, or you can be lazy like me and get some cream. So this is a leather cleaner and conditioner. I love these things, they're really good. This is basically empty now, but yeah, a leather cleaning cream will save you a bit of time, and it's sort of good for touch-ups in between really deep tack cleans. Okay, so now we're going to come on to the stables equipment and the various items you're going to need. So the first item you're going to need is a wheelbarrow, because you're going to need this for mucking out, poo-picking, carting things about. You'll literally use a wheelbarrow for everything. So the other items I would recommend getting is some sort of fork. So whether you get a fork like this, so this one here is a shavings fork, if that's what you're going to be bedding your horse on, and I also use a shavings fork for poo picking. Or you may be bedding on straw. If so, you're going to want a more traditional pitchfork for this. So this is just what you use for a straw bed. You're also going to want a shovel and a brush or broom depending on your preference. Another thing I'd recommend getting is a skip bucket. So this is like a big tub trug, and this you're going to use for, you know, quickly skipping out the stables, putting any poo in, to take it to the muck heap, or if you pick your horse's feet out, you can do it into this. And they do come in really handy. And alongside that, you may want to get something like a big tidy. This is so handy for poo picking, for getting poo out of the stable. I literally use this constantly, and if you guys have seen my videos, you'll already know that. Okay, so the next thing we want is a grooming kit. So grooming kits can come in various shapes and sizes. You can have a bag or you can have a box. The boxes are really handy if you are small or you have a tall horse for reaching the top, because you can stand on them. So I'd recommend getting a box. So with grooming kits, you can buy one like already made, so you get the kit and you get everything in it, or you can make it up yourself. If you are making it up yourself, here are the items that I think are essential to have. So these are all the items I would recommend having as a minimum. So first up we have the hoof pick. Now this is quite an old one, but it's the first one I came to. So obviously you're going to need a hoof pick to pick out your horse's hooves. I'd also recommend getting a rubber curry comb, a metal curry comb for cleaning brushes. I'd also recommend getting a shedding blade because this will come in so handy. So again, excuse the condition because it is very used, but these are magic brushes and these will be your best friend when it comes to getting dry mud off. You're also going to want a mane and tail brush, a body brush, a face brush, a few combs. I'd get the ones with like a long handle, these are a bit rubbish. And in terms of brushes, the last thing I'd recommend is getting a finishing brush. So a couple of other things I'd keep in my grooming kit is a show sheen, so some sort of detangler and coat spray. So you can use, is it Canter that I used to use, but I'm obsessed with show sheen. It's the perfect hair polish and detangler and I absolutely love it. So if you also have a Piebald or a Skewbald, a horse that has any white on it or a grey, I'd also recommend getting some stain remover because you're going to need it. And finally, for your everyday grooming kit, I'd either get some hoof oil or some hoof gloss just to pop on their hooves. Hoof gloss you'll use more if you're showing and things like that, and hoof oil is more for your daily use. So we've got our grooming kit, but we're also going to need some items to bath our horse. So I'd recommend just getting any horse shampoo. You might also want some conditioner to do their mane and tail. You're also going to need a sponge. Now this one has seen better days because I last bathed Charlie, so this I need a new sponge, but yeah, any sort of sponge will do. So the last thing you're going to need is a sweat scraper just to scrape off any of the excess water after you finish bathing them. I'd also recommend keeping a few towels around at the stables, just some old towels that you no longer use. They come in really handy, and obviously you can buy a shower if you want, but I always find a kettle mixed with some lukewarm water in a bucket works perfectly. So one thing I forgot is the simple head collar and lead rope. So this is a leather head collar. I would recommend getting a leather one because they're more durable, they're stronger, and they are a little bit more expensive, but they will last longer than a fabric one. I also think they look a bit nicer. And then this is just a normal lead rope. You might want to get a couple of lead ropes just in case they break, and they do come in really handy. So yeah, you're going to need a head collar. They might come with a head collar, but I've always bought my horses new head collars anyway. So we're going to move on to rugs now. Okay, so next up we have rugs. Now you don't need to go out and buy every single rug that you think you're going to need. You're only really going to need 4 or maybe even 3. So the rugs I recommend buying are a fly sheet from the summer, a lightweight rug that can be used during showers or when it's getting a little bit colder during summer / going into autumn. I'd also recommend, depending on your horse, so if you've got something like a thoroughbred, you might want a heavyweight. If you've got more of a cobby, you'll want a medium weight, but some sort of rug for winter. depending on, you know, how stocky they are, whether they're a native or things like that. And possibly a stable blanket, so this can be something like a Thermotex or just, you know, a normal stable blanket for if they're going to be clipped during winter and going to need a rug on in the stable, for after you've bathed them and things like that. So I also just quickly wanted to address the things that you might need in summer, because that is coming up. So the first thing you're going to need is some fly spray. Now you can either buy little bottles like this, I use the Power Phaser, or you can like kind of bulk buy it and get these bigger tubs. I'd recommend getting bigger tubs because you will save money in the long run, because you'll go through so much of it. So then you just take this, and using a measuring jug you can just fill up a little bottle. It doesn't even have to be the branded one. You can literally buy garden spray bottles like this one, and then just pop it in there so that you've always got some fly spray on hand. During summer I'd also recommend getting some sun cream if your horse has a pink nose, so if they're, you know, a grey or a skewbald or whatever. So Charlie goes through a lot of this. We've actually used pretty much all of it, but this is the Lincoln sunblock and it is the best one I've tried, and trust me, I've been through every brand going. The other thing to consider during summer is getting a fly mask for your horses. I can't show you one because mine are wearing them today, but each of my horses has a fly mask. So guys, that is the end of this video. I hope you found it useful. Give it a like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that bell icon so you get a notification every time I post. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.